California weather, bro.
If you can't tell, I'm sweating like crazy.
Dude,
right
I'm going
now.
to be sweating through my shirt by the end of this one. Speaking of Courage Podcast, we are back in studio. What's going on, my man?
Not a whole lot, just dealing with the heat, like you said.
It's crazy, man.
Seems like it's always a heat wave when we're doing these.
I know.
I'm always dying.
Have we had a cold episode yet?
There's one where I'm wearing a sweatshirt and a jacket, and you're wearing your tank top, I think, so it's kind of hard to tell what the actual weather was.
Yeah, that's true. Or it's 100 degrees and I'm wearing a flannel.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no way to really tell. So, all right, where are we headed today?
All right, since it's so hot, we're going to go to the frozen chosen of Korea. We're going to transport ourselves transcendentally to the frozen winter of 1950 in the Korean War.
That doesn't sound fun.
No, it sure doesn't. You definitely wouldn't want to be there. But
yeah. So what's surrounding this one?
So we've talked about the Korean War a bit. The Korean War is one of my favorite wars to study because, again, it's the forgotten war, right? And we're going to be dealing with naval aviation today, which is a different something that we don't always deal with and a lot of people don't talk about, I guess.
Naval aviation being?
Naval aviation, the pilots, the jet fighters.
Okay.
So when you see in combat guys flying around and fighting their jet fighters in the movie, they're not all Air Force guys. A big chunk of those are, about half of those are the naval aviators. So the Air Force is going to fly from the land, basically, and the Navy pilots are going to be flying off the aircraft carriers.
I didn't know there was a difference in that.
Yeah, and then, Army has aviation, Marines have aviation, there's Marine jet fighters, and then earlier, in World War II, the Air Corps was part of the Army. There was no separate Air Force.
Who's the hero today?
So today, our hero is going to be Thomas Hudner, but more so than any other episode we've done, this is actually going to be the story of two different people.
Okay.
It's going to be the story of Jesse Leroy Brown and Thomas Hudner. So Thomas Hudner is going to be our primary hero, but the secondary hero, or the other one that's going to kind of make this story what it is Jesse Leroy Brown as well.
Jesse Leroy Brown.
And Thomas Hudner.
Okay, where are they from?
Okay, so Thomas Hudner was born in 1924 in Fall River, Massachusetts. He's a real New England Yankee type guy, right? Born in 1924, again, that dawn of during the Depression, going to be growing up, going to be dealing with that time, and then getting into that World War II generation. He was fairly well off, though. Had a pretty comfortable life, that New England life. His dad actually ran a chain of grocery stores, and he was the oldest, I believe, of three brothers. So he grew up in the area of Concord, Massachusetts, which is where the Revolutionary War started. So for a lot of those guys there, a lot of deep history, and you're growing up surrounded by that. So of course that's going to affect
ingrained
those
in him,
guys. Yeah. Not going to say he had an easy life, but he had a much nicer life than a lot of guys during this time. He actually went to a Phillips Academy, which was kind of a prestigious prep school for high school. He started there in 1939. His dad had been there, his grandpa had been there, so he's kind of I don't want to say highborn, but he lived that traditional style life.
Following in dad and grandpa's footsteps.
Right, like you see in the
you can
movies.
imagine.
Yeah, I'm the third generation, and we're white trash from Mentos.
Yeah,
so we're
there's no grocery store chains in our people.
Exactly. There's no prestigious academies to speak of.
Yeah.
But for some people, this is their life. So this is kind of those things, those high expectations. In 1941, he was in high school when Pearl Harbor was attacked. Right. So that's going to be this stirring time that's going to be inspiring all these people. But he's still in school. While he's there, he's the captain of the track team. He plays football, lacrosse, student council. You can kind of picture the kind of guy he is, right? But when Pearl Harbor comes, like a lot of these guys, it's going to fire something up inside them. It's going to make them want to go. It's going to make them want to be a part of history and defend what they see as their homes and their freedom.
Yeah.
But he's in high school, right? So in 1943, he graduates, and he feels like the best way for him to serve his country is to become an officer. So he ends up getting accepted into Annapolis, which is the Naval Academy. If you've never heard of that.
No.
You've heard of West Point?
Yeah.
So West Point is for the Army, and then at the time, Annapolis is for the Navy and Marine Corps officers.
Equivalent type of thing?
Yeah. It's if you want to be a Naval and Marine Corps officer, generally you're going to go to Annapolis.
And it's still around?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's still like
Yeah, it's as awesome as it ever was. Our service skills are awesome. Now we have an Air Force Academy as well, but
very cool.
Marines and Navy still.
And he gets into there?
Yeah, he gets in there.
That can't be easy, right?
No, it's not. So now you need either a congressman or a senator's approval.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to be sponsored by somebody.
You have to be sponsored. You have to have excellent grades.
How does a person get sponsored by a congressman?
Having a family members who are connected in some cases, or
Okay.
you know how
Just being a stellar.
you know those people in school. You're either a star athlete or you're just a star student. The guys with the 4.5 GPAs, you can write to your senator.
Athletes.
I'm interested in this. And
Here's
I
my
want
list
your-"
of accomplishments.
Exactly. It's very competitive.
Yeah, I bet.
Because, I mean, if you go to a military academy, you're guaranteed almost a prosperous future unless you screw it up. If you
Okay.
graduate, though, you know, you're going to be open the world to all kinds
So
of
like a West
directions.
Point graduate or what did you say, Annapolis?
Yeah, Annapolis. Or the
And
Naval Academy,
immediately,
you
if
wanna call it
they
that.
are decent, they're going to be good to go.
Sure. Well, when you graduate, you're a commissioned officer, which you have to give your service back. It's 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
whatever. So you're going to be serving in that time. But when you get out, you have this built-in network of all these other guys. Hudner actually went to school with Jimmy Carter, the
Oh,
president.
wow.
President Carter. Jim Stockdale was another
Oh,
Medal of
I
Honor
see. So you're-
recipient.
so you're
It's this
meeting
very
people.
tight-knit group.
Okay. It's a fraternity.
Even today in the Army, you'll see, because a good chunk of the officers are West Pointers, and a good chunk of the officers are OCS or went
Yeah.
to college. The West Pointers all have their West Point rings on. They can see each other. It's almost like
Nice.
a Freemasons, you know.
Okay.
Oh, you're a school guy. So
And
you know
are
that.
those guys typically lifers?
A lot of times? They
Yeah, I
are.
would imagine.
Yeah, and you'll see when I do my research, you know, I'll be reading through the books. If there's a little helmet next to the name and the logs, that means their legacy, means their dad went there too, or a grandpa.
Oh,
so
wow.
You have these, you know, guys going through, which is also high expectations.
I could imagine.
But that's what he is doing, and it's it's college, it's 4 years. But actually, during World War II, they shortened it to 3 years to try to get these guys out because we needed officers so bad.
Make it quick?
Yeah, just they had to trim the fat and run them through so they could get them to the fleet essentially.
Damn. They needed officers desperately, huh?
So because of that, yeah, he graduates. He plays football at the academy again. He's an athlete, but he graduates in 1946, which is 3 years, so that's shorter than the normal. But the war ends in 1945. So now, with this generation of guys that went through, they are in the military now, but the war's over, so they kind of missed the big
they
fight.
feel like they
right?
missed it.
Yeah. And he actually becomes a communication officer aboard several surface ships. Initially, he had no desire to do any type of aviation. It wasn't something that he wanted to do. He was happy with his job. But as he got going, he wanted a new challenge. So what kind of challenge do you have? He decides he's going to go aviation. He's going to be a pilot.
Okay.
He ends up getting accepted. He passes pilot school. He serves in Florida, Texas. He does some time in Lebanon, off the coast of Taiwan and Hawaii. That's another part of the military, right? Is kind of seeing the world where these other guys wouldn't.
In peacetime, right?
In
It's
peacetime.
not like focused on a certain area.
Right. So this after World War II. It's kind of we're all the whole world is excited about this peace, but at the same time there's all these undercurrents of hostilities
Yeah.
brewing. So he's on the USS Leyte in Fighter Squadron 32, and they're actually in the Mediterranean in case there's problems going on over there. So on the one hand, you're living kind of this peaceful, good life, but at the same time, combat's always on the horizon, and we never know. Beginning of the Cold War, like we've talked about, that shadow is always looming over them, right? So he ends up learning how to fly a single-engine Corsair, which is a propeller plane, right? And even though this is the late 1940s, early 1950s, which is the dawn of the jet age, they're in these older propeller planes, but they're still good planes. So that's kind of Hudner's upbringing. But like I said, we're going to be talking about two people today, right?
Yeah.
So on the completely opposite side of the tracks, one of the guys that Hudner's going to meet in the squadron and become close friends with was a man named Jesse Leroy Brown. He's a year older than Hudner, and he's been in the squadron a little bit longer, but you couldn't have a more different life, right?
Okay.
So whereas Hudner is kind of an upper middle class white American, he's got a lot of privilege, he's got a lot of things going for him. Brown is black, he's African American, he is from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, right? Family of
Swamps.
sharecroppers, growing up with no electricity, no running water, no running
Whoa.
toilet, right? This is in the South, okay? In the 1920s, you can imagine being a black man in the South in the 1920s.
Man. Yeah.
I
Not
mean,
an easy life.
Anybody in the South during the Depression growing up, but then you add to it all these other things. This is a time when, we're dealing with Jim Crow laws, we're dealing with segregation. Jesse, as a child, has to drink from different water fountains from other people. They can't eat in the same dining cars. They can't go to the same side of the restaurant and be served on. That's what they're growing up with. And a lot of these black Americans are looking at this, and because of that, that's making them think less of themselves too, right?
Yeah.
Some people, if this is the way the world is, maybe there's a reason for it, right? But Jesse has the audacity to dream, and Jesse's dream is he wants to be a naval aviator. He wants to be a naval pilot.
Which is like probably outlandish at
there's,
that time.
There's 100% zero black naval aviators or black aviators,
to look at
in this early time. In World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen came to fame, and a lot of these guys broke a lot of ground. But for a young black kid in Hattiesburg, Mississippi,
they probably laughed at him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And people are going to be telling him, even if you are the best, even if you are smart, even if you are all these things, you're not going to be able to do it because the world won't let you. But Jesse has a dream, and when he's in the cotton fields, he's watching those planes fly over, and he's thinking, one day that's going to be me. One day I'm going to do it, and I'm going to prove everybody wrong.
What a badass!
Yeah. So through sheer will and hard work, Jesse does it. Jesse excels as a student, and he excels as an athlete. So similar to Hudner, he's killing it on the track. He's killing it playing football. He's killing all those things. He gets good enough grades that he can go to college on a scholarship. So he's encouraged by some of his mentors and those people, hey, go to these all-black colleges, right? They're going to help you. They're going to help our community. They're going to help our people. But Jesse doesn't say, I'm the best black candidate. He says, I'm the best candidate. I'm going to go to whatever school I want to. So he goes to Ohio State University, which has less than 1% of the student population is black. Damn. But he decides, I want the best education I can get, and this is where I'm going to go. While he's in school, he's working, right? He's got to work at a night shift to help be able to pay for school, but he's persevering and he's pushing through. And all this time he's dreaming of going to college. And it's fortunate that he went to this white college because they had an air cadet program there where they didn't have it at these other black schools, but because he was there, he was able to join on.
Is that why he ended up going there?
I don't think that was the initial reason. I think it might have been a happy accident. But in any case, he had put himself in the right place, and he kept himself up to those higher standards that he was able to do it. So he goes through the cadet program. In 1946, he joins the Naval Reserve and goes to ROTC. When he became a flight cadet, there was, out of 600 men in flight school in Pensacola, Florida, he was the only black student in the school. And some of these guys, some of these other pilots, it's just like you see in the movies or anything. Some of these guys are just hardcore bona fide racists, right?
Yeah.
A lot of them, no black man's going to fly in my Navy. You're trash. You're not going to do
Officers,
it.
Right?
Officers. So he's having to deal with that. But
Can you imagine?
Believe it or not, though, there was a lot of other guys that were encouraging him and helping him. And he was shocked to find that a lot of these guys were supporting him. A lot of these other soldiers and sailors and airmen and everything were trying to help him along. So he actually found this community, okay? So regardless of what you think, there's a segment of society that's going to be trying to put you down and that's going to be treating you like shit. And we have a tendency to kind of harden ourselves to it. Oh, well, they were bad to me, so screw all of them. But he's didn't allow that to happen. And because of that, now he's finding his brotherhood with other white men that have never could have shared a sandwich with him. But now they're in training with him. They're sweating with him. They're sleeping with him. They're doing all these things.
Impossible to not like
right?
each other and not
exactly
become family.
And by all accounts, Jesse was a great guy. So they did like him. And he did earn their respect. And because of that, he earned his wings on October 21st, 1948. And he's considered the Navy's first black pilot. Sometimes they say he's there might be one other guy that was around the same time, but he's one of the Navy's first black pilots.
That's
right?
amazing.
And he was able to do that. And at the time, again, despite everything that was going on in the country, there was a flurry of press coverage. They did a magazine spread on him in Life magazine. There was all kinds of press.
It was a big deal.
So it was a big deal, and they were pushing. He ended up getting married to love of his life, and he ended up having a 1-year-old daughter named Pamela. Again, when he got assigned to the USS Leyte, according to all accounts, everybody liked him, and everybody respected him, and everybody was a good friend of him. You couldn't help but like him. But they were his friends, right? All the black sailors who were in these low positions, the laundry guys and the cooks, they idolized him because they're suffering and they're dealing with this, and they're looking up to him like this guy did it. So he's almost a hero to them. He represents more than he is.
Absolutely.
And you got to imagine the burden out of that. Whenever you watch those shows, I'm the first this or I'm the first that. Everybody's looking at you, waiting for you to fall. So you have to be better. You have to be.
It's like you've talked about
all
with somebody that earns the Medal of Honor, survives, and is young. You think of Dakota Meyer. These people that have their whole life ahead of them, think of the burden that is,
Yep. Everybody's judging you. Everybody's, oh, he shouldn't have done this or he shouldn't have done that. You're damned if you do. You're damned if you don't.
And you're
you
still
have
growing
to live
up.
like a saint. Yeah, and you're making mistakes and you're living life.
Yeah.
But Again, this is where Hudner and Brown are going to meet. They're going to meet on this USS Leyte. They're going to meet in this crew, and they actually become fast friends, despite the fact that one of them is a well-to-do white kid who had, I don't want to say an easy life, but he had a good life from Massachusetts.
You can imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And then this other guy is a Southerner, which even if they were both white or both a Southerner and a Yankee is two worlds apart.
Totally different worlds.
One's a prestigious school, one's growing up in the dirt working hard, but they actually become close friends. And Hudner later said they became like brothers, right? They became wingmen for each other. So we use the term, like in a bar, hey, you're my wingman, you're watching my back. But they're literally wingmen. They're flying wing to wing. I'm watching you so you don't die, and you're watching me so I don't die.
So there's a brotherhood that forms there no matter what.
Absolutely, right? And there's only about 15 guys in each squadron. So these guys are going to know each other intimately.
They're trusting each other's life.
You have to.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to speak without speaking, and you have to be able to communicate, and you have to be, know each other inside and out and know each other's instincts to deal with it. So this is the kind of environment these guys are going to be in when they end up facing their combat.
Okay.
So that's what ends up happening. So in June 25th, 1950, North Korea launched a surprise attack and overran South Korea. We've talked about this on the show a couple times, but if you guys aren't familiar, North Korea and South Korea was divided after World War II. The communist North Koreans decided they were going to unify their country under the flag of communism. They invaded and they surprised the South Koreans. They pushed them back. We tried to support. The UN voted to send military aid to prevent the collapse of South Korea, but our troops were almost steamrolled, right? We were pushed all the way back to Pusan, and then the war kind of seesawed. It was desperate for a time. And then MacArthur and the Marines and then some of the Army guys landed in Incheon and pushed them back. We pushed them forward. Hudner and his unit are in the Mediterranean Sea, though. And because of the way the military works, you're assigned to a certain area. So they're thinking, the war looks bad, but we're not going to go because we have our duty assignment. But because of the way things work, the troops on the Leyte had the most combat experience. So they actually brought another ship in to replace them and pulled their ship to the Korean waters. So all of a sudden, these guys are going from living that Navy life of training to now it's real, and now you guys are going to be in combat.
In the shit.
So they sailed in August 8th, 1950. They were ordered to go to Korea, and they arrived on October 8th of 1950. As soon as they got there, they immediately started flying these combat missions. Again, we have jet fighters, we have napalm, we have bombs, we have missiles, and they're flying these propeller Corsairs, which are actually good for what they are because they're a little slower, so we can fight these ground troops, these massive hordes of enemies. They can come down and they can, use their bombs, their missiles, their napalm, their machine gun, and all that kind of stuff. But all these guys, some of these guys are going to be combat vets from World War II, but a lot of guys like Hudner and Brown, they've never been in combat before. That being said, Hudner's first mission, they start taking enemy fire, and they're seeing these tracers go by them. And again, that's that crucible of combat. And Hudner realizes right away, I can do this, I can stay calm. I'm trained for this, and I can trust myself and my skills. So even though those tracers are going by and you're seeing those rounds hit and everything, he's able to
stay in the
deal
fight.
with it. And the Koreans would do, and the Chinese soldiers later, they would actually lay in packs and hide in the snowbank and shoot with their rifles at the planes when they'd come over. So a lot of these planes would be landing on the ships, Hudners and Browns and these other guys, and they'd go look, and there's bullet holes all over. And all it takes is one of those holes to hit a vital part of the plane or come up through or hit you through the glass and kill you, right? And a lot of times they're not even knowing how close they are. So that's kind of the nerve that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
Right? And
it's
these
a real
flights,
threat.
Another advantage the Corsairs have over the jets is the jets can only fly for 90 minutes because they burn so much fuel. The Corsairs can fly for about 3 hours. So for 3 hours, they're flying these missions. You're going from the ship, you're flying over, you're supporting the infantry troop, you're looking for enemy, you're destroying trains and railroad tracks, you're fighting, and then you're risking your life, and then you're coming back.
Man.
And
Just
the life
up and down, up and down.
That up down roller coaster stress, right?
Yeah.
You're good, and then you go back, and then you're back on a ship, and you're eating ice cream, or you're in your warm bunk, and then the next
Hanging
day
out with
you're in
your
the grips
buddies.
of combat. And again, if you get killed outright, you're dead. If you get shot down, you might be wounded, you might be taken prisoners, you might be captured. You're going to be in that that
don't wanna
frozen
be
hell.
there.
You don't want to be there. So these are those risks they're facing every time. But this is again what these pilots are facing, and the guys on the ground. In my opinion, it's much worse because they never get out of it, and they're in this exposed area.
Yeah.
So the UN troops, headed by the Americans, we pushed the North Koreans back past the 38th parallel. We start getting all the way up to China, and that's when China enters the war, and then again it shifts. In November of 1950, Chinese troops joined the North Koreans, and they pushed back. So this seesaw battle just went back the other way. And, I mean, China is now as China was then. It's just mass and massive bodies. And
throwing
mass
bodies
and mass
at it.
of manpower coming across. So one of the most famous battles in the Korean War and one of the most decorated battles in Marine Corps history, and the Army was there as well, and the Navy and the Air Force and everybody, was the Chosin Reservoir. The Chosin Reservoir is legendary to guys that know of it. Almost 120,000 Chinese and North Korean troops surrounded 30,000 American soldiers. The Marine Corps division, and then they were supported by the 5th Regimental Combat Team in the Army that was actually out on the vanguard that was getting destroyed, trying to defend them and trying to keep them alive. This was a desperate fight, right? This was, Custer's last stand on a massive scale. We were completely surrounded. 30,000 troops surrounded by 120,000 troops.
Damn.
We were doing everything we could to get to them. We were doing everything we could to fight, and the Marines refusing to surrender. The Marines were fighting. They were advancing in the opposite direction, they called. This is those battles we've talked about where you're firing your machine gun until your machine gun's getting so hot that it won't fire anymore, and you're having to pack snow on it. Everywhere you look, there's a target. Guys are getting shot, and they're still coming, and they're still overrunning you.
Yeah.
So these pilots that are flying from the Navy decks, they're doing everything they can to save these guys on the ground. They're flying back to back to back missions, just flying as far as they can, trying to kill as many enemy troops as they can to buy these guys time on the ground. These Marines, and again, the soldiers, they're badly outnumbered. They're shivering in the cold. There's guys, they ended up having more casualties, I think, from the cold weather than the actual combat. Their feet are freezing. This is, again, you blink and your eyelids freeze. You can't shave or the water will stick to your face. They're just... your water's freezing in your canteen, you're exhausted, you're dehydrated, so you're depending on these guys. You're looking up and you're seeing these Navy guys and you're seeing these Air Force guys and these Marine pilots and everybody are flying and saving their lives, essentially. They're trying to keep them alive. And that's what Hudner and Brown are doing. On December 4th, 1950, Hudner and Brown were on a patrol near the Chosin Reservoir. They were essentially looking for enemy to kill. It's a search and destroy mission. They're going out with their guns and they're going to try to find where the enemy is, and they're going to try to wave these guys down. This is about Hudner's 20th mission, and Jesse's, it should have been similar.
Damn.
Yeah, 20 missions of, again, 3 hours at a time. This
a lot of time,
constant
bro.
risk, and that up and down stress, you never know when you're going to die. So they flew for about 100 miles, which is about 45 minutes through the harsh weather over these mountains. As you're looking down, it's just blankets of white snow. Hudner's 26 years old at the time. I think Jesse was about a year older. They actually lowered their altitude to be about 700 feet so they could actually look for the Chinese
that's
troops.
low.
Super low, right? With these propeller-driven single-engine aircraft, looking for the enemy because you can't kill infantry if you can't see them. So they're getting so low on this search and destroy mission. They're out for about 3 hours and they don't see any Chinese because the Chinese are smart by now, right? They know what the aircraft sound like. They know how to hide. So like I said, they'll hide in the snowbanks. They'll hide with their camouflage. So you can fly over and not see these guys, but they're there.
They know you're looking for them.
They know you're looking for them, and they're not going to be stupid enough to get out. So they're going to wait for you. They're going to get in their groups, and as you pass over, they're going to fire in unison. And if they get lucky, if 50 rifles fire and a couple of them hit you, they might get lucky. They might not, but it's worth a shot. So as they're flying, at about 1440 hours, which is 2:40 in the afternoon, Brown starts leaking fuel. He starts seeing his dials go, and he radios back. He thinks he's hit. He's trailing fuel. He says, I think I may have been hit. I've lost all my oil pressure, and I'm going to have to go in, right? So that's a nightmare for these guys because he doesn't know what's going on, but what happened was he was hit by ground fire, and they hit his fuel tank, so he's losing all his fuel. He doesn't have enough fuel to get back to the base, and he's starting to lose his aircraft, right? He's starting to go down. So you can imagine the feeling of that. You're up somewhat safe in the sky, and now you're knowing, I'm going to go down.
In enemy territory.
In enemy territory. The Marines are 15 miles or so behind you, and they're fighting for their lives. No one can get to you, right? And you're going down. I'm going down. Not to mention, if you crash, you very well may die on these mountainsides.
Yeah.
As he's losing fuel pressure, he's increasingly unable to control the tanks. He ends up, Hudner actually starts walking him through it because he's his wingman, so he does what he's supposed to do. He's trying to keep him calm, and he's telling him, even though you're watching your friend potentially die, you can't panic because if you panic,
so which one's going down?
Jesse's going down.
Oh,
the first
man.
naval black aviator, or one of the first, is going down, right? This guy that was a hero in Life magazine, he's going down. He's trailing fuel. But Hudner starts calling out instructions to him. He's telling him, make sure your shoulder harness is locked. Lock your canopy open. Be careful of your airspeed. He's telling him, drop your external fuel tanks and your rockets, right? Because if you have all your bombs on you and you hit, you're going to explode. But when you're in the panic of, oh, my God, I'm going down, you might forget those things. So Hudner's keeping him calm, and Hudner's telling him, strap up. Open your cockpit so you can get out if you survive this. Drop those rockets. So that's keeping Brown calm too, right? And you can imagine.
Is he trying to eject, or is he trying to lay it down?
That's not happening at this point. Not in 1950 in a Corsair. He's trying to.
He's got to take.
He's got to take it in, right? So everybody watching him, they know if this guy crashes, crashes, he's very well going to die. So they watch him, and all these guys are just kind of holding their breath, and they're desperate. And as they watch Jesse Brown, again, one of the first black naval aviators in combat in Korea, defending all these Marines, he goes down, and instead of making kind of a controlled landing, he crashes directly onto the mountainside. And as he hits, everybody just kind of sighs because they know he's dead at that point, right? They know there's no way they survived it, and they watch in horror as his plane slams into the mountainside in this bowl-shaped valley 15 miles from friendly troops. Jeez. So they kind of start to gain altitude. As they watch Jesse's plane, they could see that the aircraft broke up on impact, right? The wings are broken, the engine's ripped away from the plane, the fuselage is ruptured, the plane's twisted, the canopy that he had opened so he could try to get out has slammed shut from the force of the impact. The whole plane is crushed around him. One of the pilots actually said, Jesus, Jesse's dead, right? This is going to be that sobering moment because you know that could be you down there, and you also know you just lost a friend.
Yeah.
They're watching Jesse, right? They know their friend is potentially dead, and all of a sudden they see movement in the canopy, so they know that Jesse's actually alive.
So they're staying over and flying around?
They're staying over him because they have to protect him, because if the enemy sees that plane, they're going to swarm it, right?
Yeah.
So they're watching then, and all of a sudden they see that canopy slide back, and they see Jesse start waving his arms, so they know, oh my God, he survived. Jesse, somehow he survived that. Unfortunately, when he crashed, though, and that plane broke up, his legs were trapped under the fuselage. So Hudner's watching him, and he's seeing him waving him, and he's thinking, okay, he's good, but then he's wondering, why is he not getting out, right? Brown's taking off his gloves and his helmet, and he's frantically waving. He had to take his gloves off so he could try to unharness himself so he can try to get out. Hudner's watching, and you can imagine how helpless you're feeling, though, right?
Yeah.
You're 700 feet up in the air, you're circling around, and your friend's down there, and he's trapped in a plane. You don't know what's going to happen to him, but fortunately we have helicopters, we have rescue teams that can maybe come to get to this guy. So they radio for a helicopter, and they request a mayday to the area. But now their job is they have to keep the enemy from getting to him. If these ground troops, if these giant Chinese and Korean troops get to Brown, they're going to kill him. They may torture him. They may go, even worse than death. So they're flying around desperately, hoping their fuel doesn't run out, but they're hoping to help him. They get word that the helicopter is on the way, so they know that there's hope, right? They realize if we can hold on for about a half hour, if we can hold these enemy off for about a half hour, Brown might survive. He might get to see his wife and his kid again. But then Hudner's giving him radio instructions. He's trying to keep him calm again. And, Brown's calm on his own because he's a warrior, but Hudner's trying to tell him what to do. Try to do this, try to do that, and it's not working. And then as Hudner gets low to try to look, he sees something terrible. He sees the black of the plane's on fire. And he realizes that the smoke's starting to come and the flames are starting to come. And he realizes that Brown cannot get out. And Hudner's watching him, and he knows now that fire's going to overtake this plane and my friend's going to burn to death. So the situation just changed. While I'm on the radio with him and while we're waiting, the situation has just changed, right? Rather than if we hold off the enemy for a half hour, he may survive. Now he's going to get burned to death, even if the enemy doesn't come. They don't have any capabilities to help him. There's no way to eject. There's no way to do anything. So Hudner makes the decision that no pilot in their right mind would ever want to do. Hudner decides, I'm going to intentionally crash my plane to try to save my friend. Hudner decides, right? We've been in planes. We've talked about it. What is more scarier than crashing on the side of a mountain? Hudner knows that by crashing his plane, he could die on impact. Hudner knows by crashing his plane, he could be crippled. He could be stuck on the mountainside. He could burn up. He could be all these things. But his friend's down there, and he can't sit there and watch him die. So he actually gets over the radio, and he says, I'm going in. And everybody's just completely quiet.
Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, because you are absolutely not to ground an aircraft in any circumstances. So before he even gets permission or before he asks anything, he tries to do the best he can. He jettisons his missiles. He drops everything off. He tries to do the best he can to make a wheels-up landing and try to kind of skim into the mountainside. But all these other pilots are watching helplessly. You have one pilot potentially burning to death, and now you have Hudner just diving into the side of a mountain. Can you imagine intentionally crashing?
Gosh.
Not being a kamikaze, not crashing to kill somebody, but crashing to try to save a life.
Safely.
So he does it. He intentionally crash lands his plane, and he crashes straight into the mountainside about 100 meters from Jesse. As soon as he does, he feels his back snap, his own back. He feels a sharp pain in his back, right? But other than that, he's pretty okay. He later said, I didn't think anyone could survive that night. It was 15 degrees above zero. My thought was, if I go in, I might save his life. I just didn't think very much about hurting myself. I just felt that for what it was worth taking a chance. You have to know you can die.
Oh, dude, there's no way.
If you can't die, you know you're going to be wounded or you're going to be injured. If not, you could be captured by the enemy or killed. And not only that, you're risking your career.
Screw everything else after.
You can get court-martialed for all this.
You're not going to survive a plane crash.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
and the exposure
you have
to
to
the
have
cold.
known, like, the chances of me even landing this thing safely are
Right.
1 in a million.
But to him, his option was to watch his friend die or to risk his own
Yes.
life, and that wasn't an option to him.
And he's not leaving a life potentially that's a shitty life.
Right.
He's leaving like a really good life.
Yeah,
You know
exactly.
what I mean?
And again, like we've talked about it, this is a brother that's trapped on a mountainside that's going to risk his life burning to death. But scale back for a minute. Scale back from Korea. Scale back to the United States of America in 1950. Scale back to the fact that Hudner and Brown can't even eat a sandwich together in a diner because of segregation in the
Yeah.
South. Hudner and Brown can't drink at the same water fountain in the South. Hudner can't date Brown's sister, and Brown can't date Hudner's sister in 1950. There were white people in this country that, were racist towards black people. There were black people in this country that thought the same exact way about white people.
Yeah.
And many of those black people in this country thought no white man would ever risk his life for me, right?
So screw them.
So screw them. But in this horrible hellscape of combat, we're finding, the most sincere form of humanity there is. There's a black
None of that
man,
matters.
a warrior who's done so much for his country, who needs help, and there's a white man of privilege who's intentionally risking his life, right? Think about what that says. But he did that. So
I wouldn't even say risking his life. That's giving it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's some actions where you're like, we might get out of this.
Right.
This one, man.
Yeah, and Hudner, again, there's no way, this isn't like, if I land properly, I've trained for this, I'm going to survive. This is, you're probably going to die, but he slams his jet or his Corsair into the side of that mountain.
Because he couldn't stand to see his brother down there die.
He just couldn't watch him, and he couldn't listen to him, and he couldn't live with himself.
I'm going to die with you if you die.
At least we'll go out together, right? But somehow he survived when he hits the ground. So as soon as he hits the ground, he strips off his gear, and he starts running towards Brown, and Brown's surprisingly
probably
calm.
Brown sitting there going, holy,
can you imagine?
Can
you imagine being there, risking burning to death? You just crashed, you're disoriented,
you're terrified,
you probably
that
have
you're
a bad head injury, your legs are trapped, literally trapped,
and
that's
you got
panic
fire.
Mode. There's fire, there's enemy around, you're in one of the biggest battles in United States history, and then you see your buddy careening his plane into the mountainside, and then and then you look at him, and then he's running towards you.
You think he giggled at all?
I don't know, man. There had to be some swelling of pride, right? There had to, like an action movie. You son of a bitch. But what?
Or that's my boy.
Yeah. What more form of brotherhood could there be?
There's not.
And again, like just
this is such a great story.
him running towards him, right? It's stirring. It's. You can boil everything down to this, right? Charging machine guns, his Battle of Honor, jumping on grains. This is it, man. He literally intentionally crashed his airplane to try to get to him. So as soon as he hits the ground, he immediately runs to Brown's side and starts trying to pull him out of the wreckage, right? Because now, just because you crossed your plane, it wasn't a success. So he's trying to pull him out, but the ice is so thick on his boots, he can't get any leverage. So he's slipping. So he has to grab the wing of the plane, and he's trying to pull on Brown. And Brown's calm. Brown's just telling him, Hudner, we got to get out of here, man. We got to get out of here, Thomas, because he knows that they could be overrun. The other pilots are still hovering around trying to protect them, but by now, Brown's in intense pain. He's been on the ground for a half hour, and this is getting close to freezing. This is barely over freezing. At night, it's going to get far, far, far below freezing.
They'll never make it through the night, right?
Oh, absolutely not. By the time Hudner got to him, Brown's hands were already frozen into claws because he had taken his gloves off to try to unbuckle himself, right? So his hands are useless. He is just sitting there freezing. He's going in and out of consciousness from his head injuries, from his lack of blood, from everything. But Hudner's trying to keep him alive, and Hudner's trying to give him support. Hudner actually takes his own scarf and his beanie, and he puts the beanie on Brown's head, and he wraps his scarf around his hands just to give him that comforting, give him that brotherhood. Like we have kids. When you have your kids, and you just are sometimes it's just more about holding them than actually physically doing anything. And he's doing the same thing, even though Brown's trapped and he's potentially probably going to die. Now he's dying in the arms of a brother who's comforting him and who's putting those things around his hands, and he's showing him that you're not a statistic and you're not just a casualty. You're my friend, and I'm going to do everything I can for you. Brown starts getting worse, though. You can imagine the blood loss and just that exposure to the cold. So he starts getting worse, and he starts speaking slower and slower, and that fire's still going. So Hudner is desperately picking up snow from the snowpack and shoving it in. He's trying to put the snow out with his hands. So Hudner's freezing, too. Hudner's got ice on his boots. He's got that back injury. He's shoving snow in there. He's trying to talk to Brown. He's trying to keep him alive, and he's running back to his plane to get on the radio. He gets on the radio and he says, get me that helicopter, and the helicopter's coming. So he says, bring me fire extinguisher, bring me an axe. We need to try to get him out. We need to get Brown out. Meanwhile, Brown is slipping in and out of consciousness. But because of Hudner's actions, Brown knows that he's not alone, right? He knows there's someone there trying to help him. So instead of that desperate feeling, he has a feeling of comfort, As he's facing his eternity, he knows that he's dying with a friend. Brown had to be in intense pain, you know. You
Yeah.
can just imagine. But Hudner said he never complained. He never said anything disparaging. He never gave up. He just kept saying, you know, we got to get out of here. Finally, the helicopter arrives. That's that sweet sound of those propellers landing on the ground. And Hudner runs over to it, and the Marine pilot gets out. They usually have a 2-man crew, but they left the other guy so they could try to get them in there.
Yeah.
He brings the axe, and he brings the fire extinguisher. By now, Hudner's been on the ground for a half hour packing snow. It's a bit later now. It's almost 3 p.m. when the helicopter gets there. The lieutenant brings the fire extinguisher. They spray it on the plane, but it's so small it doesn't do anything. You know, the fire extinguisher's out, and that flame is still smoldering. So Hudner takes the axe, and for the next 45 minutes, he just beats on this plane trying to get his friend out. As his friend's coming in and out of consciousness, Hudner's using every, part of his body that he can. He's just beating on this plane with this axe, but the axe is just bouncing off. It's just not doing any good. And you can imagine the impact that plane hit and folded up.
Yeah.
There's no fixing that, you know. They're almost resigning this to him. They briefly considered chopping Brown's legs off to try to get him out of there, and then Brown was for that, but they realized there's no way he's going to survive that if we do that, and neither of them could wield the axe to get to him. By now, it's getting dark, and unfortunately, these helicopters aren't equipped to fly at night, so the Marine pilot pulls Hudner aside, and he tells him, I can't stay here. We have to go. We have to go. And Hudner recognizes it's suicide to stay there, right? They're all going to die if he stays. So he did everything he could, but there's just no saving Brown. So he walks back over to Brown, who's been in and out of consciousness. And Brown looks up at Hudner and he tells him, he knows he's dying. So he tells his final words were, tell Daisy I love her. And then Hudner responded, I will. And then Brown slunk out of consciousness for the last time, and he never regained consciousness.
They left? They had to leave him?
They had to leave him, so Hudner had to wait. Hudner watched him, as they're getting ready to load the helicopter, and he watched Brown. Brown is now unresponsive. Brown is basically passed to the other side at this point, right? So his body's trapped in that plane. That helicopter was unable to go at night, so Hudner goes back one more time to check on him, and at this point, Brown's completely motionless, and he either died sometime before that or immediately after there, right?
Okay.
So as Hudner's leaving, he yells back to Brown's body, I'll come back for you. But they had to leave. Right, so it's interesting on this one because it's not a success story. He didn't get his body back. He didn't get his life back.
To have to
but he
leave
risked
him.
his life. Yeah, and Hudner later said, one of the worst things when something has happened to you is that feeling that you're alone. Just being with him to give him as much comfort as we could was worth the effort. So even though he risked his own life and he risked, potentially that helicopter's pilot's life, it was worth the effort just to be with him.
So he didn't die alone.
Just so he didn't die alone, and just so he didn't die in that panic. So the helicopter crew went back, and instead of going to the ship, they ended up in the chosen reservoir with the Marines because they couldn't make it back initially. So there was about a day delay. And now Hudner's got to face the consequences of his actions because humanity or not, you just lost $1 million airplane. You just risked a helicopter pilot's life and all these other guys. So he thinks that he's going to be disciplined. But the admiral of the ship was actually, very supportive of him. And Hudner initially wanted to go back and do everything they could to get this body back, to get Brown's body, but it took too long. So by the time they got to the ship, they decided, the admiral told him, we'll get these crews out there. But Hudner was being rational at that time. And he says, it's too dangerous. We can't do anything. They couldn't leave Brown's body there for the enemy, though, right? And they couldn't leave those planes. So to prevent the body from being taken by the enemy, 2 days later, a Navy squadron flew over, and they gave Jesse Brown a warrior's funeral, essentially. So as Brown's body was trapped in the plane, they looked over, and they could see that his clothes had been stripped, meaning the enemy soldiers had come and taken everything off him. He had been ransacked and everything. But as they flew over him, they dropped napalm over top of Brown's body, and they ignited him. They immolated him like they used to do with the warriors. And it wasn't a disrespectful thing. It was quite the opposite. They had a solemn moment. They said goodbye. They lit him with the napalm, and one of the pilots over the intercoms recited the Lord's Prayer as they watched Brown's body burn.
Damn.
Right? And again, this is one of the first black naval aviators, the first black naval aviator killed in combat on the side of a hill in Korea. Nothing anybody could have done could have saved him, but somebody at least risked their life to die with him if it needed to be. Unfortunately, he survived.
How hard that had to have been for him to leave.
And Brown's body was never recovered, right? He was left on that side of the hill after it was immolated. And Hudner, because of his back injury, he was grounded for a month. He couldn't fly for another month because of the pain to his back, just to show you. This wasn't just, I skidded out on the side of the plane. This was, he crashed on the side of the freaking plane. And he ended up having a back injury for about 8 years. He suffered a lot of pain from that, but he ended up staying in the Navy. He flew a total of 27 combat missions during the war. And then in January of 1950, they rotated back to the Mediterranean, and he was out of combat.
Jeez.
Hudner never forgot his friend Jesse, though, right? He kind of lived the rest of his life devoted to this guy on the side of the hill that he was unable to save, but he did everything he could. On Friday the 13th, April of 1951, Hudner was awarded the Medal of Honor from President Truman for his actions, for trying to save him. At the funeral, Jesse Brown's wife came to the funeral, and Hudner was able to meet her, and Hudner gave her his last words, which he promised he would tell her. So he told Jesse's wife that Jesse loved her. He at least fulfilled that promise that he was able to do, right? And he ended up being the first person in Korea to receive the Medal of Honor. So again, this is big fanfare. So people in the country are seeing a white man and a black woman and a white man who risked his life for a black man. And they're hearing the heroism of Jesse Brown. Again, this isn't just Hudner's story. This is Brown's story. And people are seeing this. And, they ran magazine articles and stuff. And it's
acknowledging like you guys got to go.
It's just one small part, but for somebody out there can be reading that and going, wow, if you're a white man, you might be out there thinking like, wow, this Jesse Brown, look what he did for our country. And if you're a black man, you might be thinking, wow, look what Thomas Hudner did for one of our people. Look at, this is what America's about, right?
Yes.
This is what being a soldier's about. This is what being a serviceman's about. Nobody thought about color. Nobody did anything. He saw his friend down on the mountainside, and he intentionally crashed his plane. And then, like I said, he devoted his life, in a sense, to Jesse Brown. After he got the medal, he went back home, and the town proclaimed Thomas Hudner Day. They had a celebration for all their citizens. Everybody pitched in together, and they actually gave him a check for $1,000, which is a lot of money in 1951. Hudner immediately took the check, endorsed it to Brown's wife, and gave it to Brown's wife.
Wow.
So just those kinds of things. Hudner stayed in the Navy. He finished his career. He served in all kinds of assignments like a lot of these successful guys do. He did a tour in Vietnam. He didn't fly, but he was in charge of an aircraft carrier, I believe, off the coast of Vietnam. Throughout his life, though, occasionally people would still criticize him for crashing the plane, and saying, you have to let your personal feelings go. We needed that plane more than we needed that body. Brown was going to die anyways, right? Brown was going to die, and you risked a plane. And Hudner would say, there are still people who think I did the wrong thing. They say, you destroyed a perfectly good multi-million-dollar fighter plane for one man. But for me, what is a life worth? Basically saying, I don't care. He would have destroyed the whole fleet.
Yep.
And again, he had to know he was going to die, but he had to try.
Yeah.
In 1957, he was still in the Navy. He served with the Air Force on an exchange program. He learned to fly jet aircrafts. He flew developmental aircrafts, again, and a bunch of other assignments. And then he ended up retiring in 1973. 4 days before his retirement, the Navy commissioned a ship named after Jesse Brown, the USS Jesse Brown.
Nice.
And Thomas Hudner was there, along with Brown's wife, to be able to break the bottle on the ship. Like a lot of these other guys, he ended up working with the USO and various veterans organizations. In 2001, he went to Mississippi State University because he was given another medal by the Korean government. So the first thing he did with it is he went to Mississippi University. He found Jesse Brown's widow again, and he gave her the medal for
That's
Jesse.
amazing.
So just kind of his whole life, he was there.
Out.
In 2013, as an old man, Jesse actually took a trip to North Korea, and he met with North Korean government officials, and he begged them to give him the opportunity to find his friend's body. He wanted to go into North Korea and find the wreckage of the planes and see if he could recover some remnants. And the Koreans refused to allow him to do so, but they were actually somewhat receptive, and they told him he could come back later, which of course never happened, just politics. But Kim Jong-un himself actually said that he respected Hudner and that he had come so far for a friend, basically. Right? 2013, from 1950-51, he's remembering his friend, and he never forgot Jesse Brown, and he never made himself the hero of the story. He always made sure that Brown's story was told, right?
Yeah.
Even though he was the Medal of Honor recipient in this action, both of these men were heroes. Hudner died on November 13th, 2017, when he was 93 years old. He died at home surrounded by his family, so he had a good life. And again, to me, this is the embodiment of not only what America can be, not the nonsense racial divide that people sometimes push on us that is non-existent to people who actually consider it, know. But this is what the military is about. This is what Brotherhood's about. This is what sacrifice is about. This is about all of those things. And I liked what Hudner said about Jesse, because again, anytime you ask Hudner about Hudner will start telling you about what an accomplishment Jesse was, right?
Yeah.
Keeping his memory alive. As huge of a feat as Jesse Brown's accomplishments were, they would be forgotten by history to a degree if Hudner hadn't done his part and Hudner didn't keep bringing him up. And about his death, Hudner, speaking of Jesse, said, "He died in the wreckage of his airplane with courage and unfathomable dignity. He willingly gave his life to tear down barriers of freedom of others. And that's what he said when they commissioned the ship for Jesse Brown. So
that's awesome.
That's the story of Thomas Hudner and Jesse Brown.
That's an awesome story. Damn, that's heavy.
Yeah, it's
dude.
a little different because like you said, it was an unsuccessful mission. He didn't save Brown's life. He didn't even recover the body, but he faced an absolute almost certainty of death by crashing his plane into the mountainside.
Just to lay with his buddy.
Just
while
to
he
lay
died.
with his buddy, just to hold him, just to have that comforting hand. You know, there's nothing worse than being alone when you're wounded. There's nothing worse than being alone when you're panicking. There's nothing worse than seeing your friends abandon you, and that didn't happen here. None of those guys did.
And then Jesse to have the courage to tell him, "Hey, you got to get out of here."
Right? Yeah, and
say, "Tell my wife,
tell
I
my
love
wife
her."
I loved her. Jesse,
And not saying, "Don't leave me, you bastard." You know what I mean?
according to Hudner, Jesse never cried. Jesse never begged. Jesse never panicked. Jesse said, "We got to get out of here." And then his final words, "Tell my wife I love her." Basically, let me die with dignity. And again, the weight of the world was almost on his shoulders, being the first black aviator, and being what he represented. And he held that up more than anyone could. Right?
That's amazing.
Not only did he accomplish these things and become an aviator, he became a combat pilot. How many lives did both of these guys save?
Oh,
How many
man.
lives did all of these guys
Countless.
save? How many of the Marines and soldiers pinned down and chosen are seeing these planes fly over? Some of those could have been Hudner. Some of those could have been Jesse.
Yeah.
Right? And then when he does go down, he's not panicking. He's not thinking about anything else. He's just thinking about the mission. I got to get out of here. And then, okay, it's time to die. I'm gonna, pass to the other side, and I'm gonna do it with dignity. And Hudner, God, like you said, you can imagine what it had to feel like to walk away. But can you imagine how much worse it would have felt to have flown away and wondered the rest of your life if there's anything else you could have done?
I think about Jesse seeing his buddy crash the plane. He had to have giggled a little bit,
Right,
dude.
there
like,
had to
son
just
of
be,
a bitch.
yeah. Well, again, that helpless feeling, and you're looking around, and you're seeing the smoke, and you're frantic, and do they see me? Is there enemy? Am I hearing rifle shots? And then, who in their right mind would crash?
And if they were buddies, he had to have known.
Yeah, he's
who
got
it
that.
was,
Which one it was?
you know?
Well, it's his wingman. He can't
Yeah.
let his wingman down, right?
That is awesome.
From the second he started trailing fuel, Hudner's on the radio talking. Hudner's on the radio trying to keep him together. They're
Trying to keep 'em
separated, but
alive.
they're together over the radio, and he's just not going to do it. He's not going to walk away not knowing everything he could. Even though when he crashed, all he had was his body, so he used his hands to pick up the snow to try to quench the fire. He used his boots to try to pull him out. He grabbed on his straps. He tried to pull him. He used his own gloves and his own hat to put around him. You know, when Jesse died, Jesse was wearing clothing of Thomas Hudner, right? That he gave him to try to keep him warm. That almost an embrace, right? Like a hug, but it's a wrapped with a scarf that he had wrapped around him. Something made to keep him warm that he needed. He gave to this man, right? That's in this dire situation because he needs it more than I do. So I'm going to give that to him.
Man, it goes right hand in hand in what you always say about the military. You know, there's no race. There's no everybody's equal.
Right.
And this is a good example of that.
It's a perfect example. And Hudner had another good quote that I didn't write down, but he's saying people that were never in the military, you'll never understand the Brotherhood. Yeah. And people that were never in combat, there's no way you can know. There's no way you can understand that life and death, that trusting someone else with your life, knowing that, my wife and my kids' happiness depends on my survival, and that depends on you. I'm putting it in my hand. When you're clearing rooms in Iraq and I go left and you go right, if someone's behind me, I'm dead. The only thing that's going to save me is you doing your job, and I have to put my faith in you. Right? Yeah. When I'm flying in a plane, I have to have my faith that you're watching out for the enemy. You have my wing. You have my back. That's what they say, got your six, right? Yeah. I have to know that the rear guy in the convoy has my best interest the same as I have their best interest from the front of that convoy. You have to rely on each other, and that's what that Brotherhood is. And these are kids, man. 24, 25, 26 years old. That's still young as hell, Yeah. It's a little bit older than the 18, 19-year-olds we sometimes have.
But still, I mean...
What were we doing at 26? You know what I mean?
Not
What's the average kid doing at 26 nowadays, or 24 or 25?
Not
These guys were flying multi-million-dollar aircraft, putting their lives on the line. Flying off an aircraft carrier and landing in and of itself. Think of how dangerous
that would be a
is.
life-changing thing for either one of us.
Right, yeah. So, heroes, just all shapes and sizes. Heroes come in black and white, and that's, to me, the spirit of America, and that's that's what America's all about.
That's awesome.
Anybody that doubts us, you can take it for what it's worth. But to me, America is Thomas Hudner crashing his plane on the side of a mountain to save another hero. One hero risking his life to save another hero, and in failing so, at least he gave him dignity and let him die together.
Yep. Good closer right there.
Cool.
All right, man. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Comment down below. Share, subscribe. Tell your friends.
Leave me some comments, man. I need comments. Let me know if you want to do Vietnam, Korea, or I did it on Instagram, but put it on here. Vietnam, Korea, World War II, or older. Leave it in the comments.
Or if you got any names of people that you want to hear, let us know. All right. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one.